All right. Hi, Claire. My name is Duncan. Please, thank you for joining us for this interview.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Great. We're gonna get started. So, the first question that I have for you, if are you comfortable? Are you prepared for all
Yeah,
this?
I'm ready.
Great. We're gonna go ahead and get right into it.
Okay.
So, the first question that I have for you is, tell me about a time when you were a part of a multidisciplinary team and you were able to coordinate the team to achieve a patient outcome.
Sure. That's a great question. Thank you so much. So the event that comes to mind took place in the M4 MICU at Stanford Health Center. And I had a patient who let's see, he had suffered a very large wound to his leg from a bicycle accident. He was not a bicycle accident, a motorbike accident in the Philippines. He was very sick. He was cared for in the Philippines for a couple months and ended up being flown back to Stanford. And he was also exhibiting signs of sepsis, and he had a pacemaker. He had some other chronic issues going on. He was on, CRT dialysis, and his prognosis was, possible recovery, but he was having a hard time. And they wanted to the wound on his leg was very large. It went from his thigh all the way down to his ankle.
Wow.
And it had necrotized as well. It was just in a bad state. So the options were amputation or putting a flap in and seeing if that would help avoid an amputation.
Mm-hmm.
So things were, I had the opportunity of caring for him for, I think, about three full days, which was a great experience. And on day 3, he had somebody came in to do an echo on his heart, and unfortunately there were some downward trends with his ejection fraction, and they also found a growth in there that it wasn't identified, but it was some sort of growth. So that wasn't a very good sign. And meanwhile, the surgical team, so the plastic surgery team, they wanted to do this flap, put a flap on his leg. And this all kind of everything started coming together on this one particular day where, they were assessing him, his heart wasn't looking good. The surgery team wanted to put a flap on. He also just was showing signs of sepsis. His pulses in his feet were barely palpable. I have to get that word right, but we had to use a Doppler basically every single time to find a pulse in both legs, or both feet. So, the possibility of a flap even taking with him having barely any circulation was really minimal.
Right.
And his daughter was there and his ex-wife. They were both there, and they saw that this last day, they saw how much he had degraded over the past few days. And they became very concerned that if he were to go into this surgery, he wouldn't make it out, which I think is completely understandable. So it got to the point where, the daughter, who was actually also in nursing school, she started to, she started to say, I'm not too sure I'm okay with this surgery. And she was the one that was consenting to everything. She was the primary, person in the family that had that. So but meanwhile, plastic surgery was coming in, and they were trying to get, everything, they were coming in and saying, okay, we're going to be here at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, and we're going to come pick him up and put that flap on. And she was like, well, no, actually you're not. And because, I'm not okay with that. We just did a test and it's not looking good. And my sisters are coming tomorrow morning and I want to make sure he's in this room so that they can see him, because if he goes to surgery, he might not come back. So, and then, so then she kind of said that in her own words to the person from the plastics team. And the person from the plastics team was kind of like, well, I didn't get the message, I didn't get the memo. And, I was kind of standing there watching the conversation go down. And so then, I intervened, politely, and I said, yeah, I don't know if you know this, but we just had an echo done of his heart, and there's some things that are looking like they're trending downward. And she said, oh, I didn't get that message, and so she said she would go and look at the details and go talk to her team. And then the next thing that happened was the anesthesiologist came, who was going to be, anesthetizing her the next morning for the plastic surgeons. And, I kind of told her the situation, and she said right away, she said, oh my gosh, yeah, I didn't hear any of these new updates. But that makes no sense. I don't want to anesthetize this person, and I don't think this flap is going to take anyways, so she agreed. And so it was kind of like a whole bunch of people coming together, and not everybody had all the information at the moment. And I was there with my preceptor, and we were kind of the front line at that point. We did have the most recent data, and we had, we knew how the family was feeling. We had been taking care of this person for the past 3 days. So we saw what was going on. We had been dealing, with all these different team members, and it was a hard situation, and I think that we both dealt with it really well. And then, I'm sorry, what is the rest of the question? That was the situation, the action I took, and I'm sorry, I'm thinking out loud right now. So just want to make sure I answer everything. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Tell me about a time when you were part of a multidisciplinary team and you were able to coordinate the team to achieve a patient outcome.
Okay, great. So yeah, thank you for repeating the question. Yeah, so that was kind of the whole situation. And my role in that situation was really, I felt like, to advocate for the patient and the family, because there was all these teams coming together and they all didn't have the same information. And things were moving very quickly, and there was a very quick timeline. And, the family, especially with that plastic surgeon coming in, at the beginning, she wasn't being heard, and she needed somebody to help her explain what was going on to that surgeon about, what had changed, etc. So I felt like I really helped out in that situation. And, the patient actually passed away the next day. And it was a lot for everybody. And yeah, it was kind of complicated, but it was, just kind of working through all the details of those things, and always, being aware of who is coming in and out of the room and what their role is. And, things can get pretty complicated when you have a patient that needs some kind of big surgery or a transplant or something like that, and there's different teams involved. So yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing that that answer. That's a great story. I love what I loved about your response is when you said, I intervened by doing this. I also love when you said my role was to do that, to be an advocate for the patient, and then also just like when you said like I had to be aware of the various people coming into the room. Those were kind of the key things that I picked up on.
Okay, cool.
That response.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Also just hitting those buzzwords, right? Intervention.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally. I know. I got to practice this stuff because these are hard questions, you know.
Totally. All right. Next question for you.
Okay.
All right. So we all make mistakes on the job. Tell me about a time when you made a mistake at work. How did you handle it? What was the outcome?
Okay, great. Yeah, this is an excellent question. Thank you so much. So I was working on a med surg floor at El Camino Hospital, and I was paired with a nurse for the day, and we had 5 patients, and it was a very busy morning. We were extremely behind because of multiple situations with the first patients we saw, you know, them both having many drugs or many medications and having to move a patient, et cetera, things just coming up. So it was about 10:30 in the morning, and we were still working with our second patient and trying to get through the medication administration. And you know, at this point, you know, my nurse, she's going at a very fast rate, and I'm trying to keep up with her. So and you know, of course, help in any way that I can and not slow her down. And so what happened was we were, you know, starting the meds, and I logged into the computer on my account in my MAR, and you know, she had to leave really quickly to get some IV lining, then came back, and then, you know, hopped onto the computer. And, you know, of course, it was still logged into my name. And, you know, I offered my help. I said, can I start scanning the meds for you? And she said, yes. So I went to the countertop that was, you know, perpendicular to the computer, and was just helping scan through the meds one at a time. And you know, she would read them aloud to me as we got through. And we came to a blood pressure medication. And of course, there's always a parameter for blood pressure meds. It's generally 100/60. And I wasn't looking at the computer. She was kind of handling the mouse and the screen. I was literally at with the medications, you know, and there was this patient, everything he was NPO, so everything had to be crushed, capsules had to be emptied, you know, and then mixed with fluid. So I was kind of handling all of that. I was scanning and then, you know, opening up all the medications and crushing them and kind of doing that whole thing. So when the blood pressure med came up, I didn't look, you know, she basically decided to use the blood pressure that was taken earlier in the morning by the CNA. And the blood pressure was actually 99/59. And so I didn't know that. I just didn't, I figured that since she was the nurse, she was making sure that the blood pressure was in parameter. So we just kind of kept moving, and I didn't even know that had happened. And it was only until later when my clinical instructor was checking my charting that she noticed that had happened. And she told me, Claire, you can, you know, there's a medication error here. And, you know, at first I was surprised because like I said, I didn't know it happened. And then my second reaction was that I was concerned for the patient, of course. So what we did was we immediately went to the patient and checked his blood pressure and made sure that he was okay. And he was. His blood pressure was totally in range. And then, you know, I felt horrible, you know, because I did something that I didn't know I did, and I made a mistake that, you know, could have, you know, hurt somebody. So I reflected a lot about it, and the things I learned were I learned a few things. You know, first of all, you know, just really protecting my badge and not allowing anybody to chart in my chart is something that I've always remembered from that, because, you know, I wouldn't make that choice to violate a parameter, and I'm not really sure what, you know, I know it was 1 point off, and some nurses do that. I think the best thing to do is just retake the blood pressure and get a new reading. Yeah, so, and that's basically the other thing I learned, is that every time there's a blood pressure medication, you need to take that vital sign before you administer, no matter what, unless there's a very recent reading that's in the chart, that's relatively recent, and then you can use that. Otherwise, it's extremely important to check that vital sign. Um, yeah, so that was the gist of it. Yeah.